backwards. Repetition. Remember it. All right. Everybody, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here, all right? Going in the campaign, Dr. Paul could count on one thing. He knew that he had the dedication of supporters. All right, we need to make sure that we follow through on that, all right? So, my name is Lorenz. I'm the regional director here for Central Washington of for the Washington operation. And if you haven't had a chance yet to help us out at the Bellevue HQ or anywhere else in the field, please do so. Find, any volunteer here. The majority of them have. We've seen them in the field somewhere. Grab one of us and we'll be able to tell you about it. So tonight I have the high honor of introducing Clint Didier. But first I want to make a quick appeal to all of you who are here to support Ron Paul. We all admire Ron Paul, the undisputed champion of the Constitution. Dr. Paul is the only authentic conservative. And he is the only Republican candidate able to defeat Barack Obama, return our civil liberties, and restore America to lasting prosperity. But cheering on Ron Paul is not enough. That's why I ask all of you, who give so much in so many ways already, to support Ron Paul by making sure you caucus for him on Saturday, March 3rd. Caucusing for Ron Paul on March 3rd and voting for him and his delegate slate is what will make his platform of constitutionally limited government a reality. No other action will. Some are waiting for the privilege of voting for Ron Paul in November during the general election and seeing him defeat Obama. But I assure you that there will be no such opportunity unless we win Washington State for Dr. Paul. Winning Washington means getting involved right now. Become a precinct leader. Educate yourself on the process of the caucus. You can do this with all the help of the supporters and the campaign here in Washington State. This is the time we have all been waiting for. So do what it takes. Let's make the guy proud, all right? Everybody, Clint Didier!
He ran for Senate against Murray. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I voted for him.
Yeah, I've seen
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies, gentlemen, friends, neighbors, patriots.
Whoa! Yeah!
We the people. We the people. The first three words of the most powerful document in our nation's history. This is our country. If we just have the courage and fortitude to take it back.
Yeah!
Charlton Heston said, the American dream is not success or riches, it's freedom. Freedom!
Amen, brother!
We the people can continue the path towards tyranny and slavery, or we can turn shoulder to shoulder and fight our way back to the light, to the truth, to our Constitution, and to the Lord God Almighty. Coach Joe Gibbs always told the Redskin players, get yourself ready for the worst possible predicament you can imagine. And then after saying that, he would hand us a game plan. I've reviewed Dr. Paul's game plan, and I particularly like the first 10 scripted plays. 1, abolish the Department of Education. Because it's indoctrinating our children to be global citizens.
Yeah!
2, abolish the Department of Energy. Because it does not allow America to get its own natural resources. 3, abolish the Department of Interior. Because a duck stamp today is 10. Tomorrow it's going to be 25 so they can buy more of your land.
Yeah, no.
4, abolish the Department of Commerce.
Yeah!
Abolish the Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Yeah!
Defund the EPA. Abolish the Federal Reserve. Stop all foreign aid.
Yeah!
Stop all unconstitutional wars.
Yeah!
say, why? Why get out of the UN? It's a peacekeeping force. Well, Obama just announced a global taxation. The U.S. pays almost 30% of the funding for the UN. And in 04 and 05, it was $10 billion for those 2 years. Obama stated, I did not need Congress's approval to attack Libya. I was mandated by the UN. And we have UN environmental laws being implemented today in the United States. Global warming, i.e. climate change. Biological diversity, i.e. sustainable growth, an assault on your private property rights, and Agenda 21, which covers everything else, all of which are destroying individual liberty. Vladimir Lenin, the communist leader of Russia, commented that America could be destroyed from within because of the useful idiots it possesses to undermine the three pillars of our society: patriotism, morality, and spiritual life. I didn't think there were useful idiots in America until I heard the likes of Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid, Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, Maxine Waters, and the list goes on and on and on.
Sounds good. That was March.
Is this our rendezvous with destiny that Ronald Reagan spoke of? Have Americans been transformed from the land of the free and the home of the brave to the land of the constrained and the home of the cowardly? Is life so dear, peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? I say no, because I see a whole room full of patriots here in defiance of tyranny. I believe the next president of the United States needs to be a defender of America, protecting and maintaining her sovereignty. One who understands the worldwide economic crisis we face, and first and foremost, demonstrate he has America's interest at heart. The next president must understand what constitutes a free market, be willing to stand tall against powerful lobbying interest, and have the courage to fight for a sound monetary system, fiscal sanity, and individual liberty. I am an American farmer, and I yearn for strong constitutional leadership. I see Ron Paul as a loyal disciple of our founding fathers who gave us the opportunity to experience life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. He has displayed integrity and an adherence to the Constitution for over 30 years. I have found no other presidential candidate so disciplined.
Or in Congress.
And so at this time, it is a great honor and privilege to introduce to you the next President of the United States, Dr. Ron Paul.
on. There is an election coming up. You've heard of that, I think. And we have a lot of work to do. This country's in a mess, and that's why we have a lot of work to do. But actually, there's some very good news. The country is changing for the better. The big problem is the country's changing, but Washington hasn't heard about it. So we need a message sent to Washington, and we can do it in this campaign. So I welcome your support and your enthusiasm. But you know, the big question is will we realize that when an idea's time has come, armies can't stop it? The idea of liberty is returning. It's returning stronger than ever before. A lot of people think that when we talk about liberty and the Constitution, we want to go back to the old days. But you know, the old days are really tyranny. That's what history is all about. We only had a little test of liberty, and the best test in the history of mankind has been in this country. We had the most freedom and the most prosperity and the largest middle class. But most people realize it's no longer true. There are other countries now that are richer and freer, unfortunately, and yet the American people are wanting to get their liberty back, and that's what this campaign is all about. We've gotten into a mess because we've lost our love for liberty probably in an incremental way about 100 years ago. One thing that happened back then was, for some reason, that we lost the concept of liberty. Liberty means that you have a right to your life. It's your life. You should be able to run your life as you choose, as long as you don't hurt other people and take other people's property. It's your life, and it should be your own, and nobody should mess with you.
Yeah!
Messing with you and undermine your liberties. If you have a government, which we do, the government should be limited like the Constitution does. It should be limiting to protecting those liberties, not undermining those liberties. But unfortunately today we have too much secrecy in government and too much privacy removed from the people. The government's supposed to protect our privacy, and the government is supposed to be open to the people. Concept of economic freedom, property rights and earning money, and for some reason they got chopped up into two pieces, but it's all one thing. If you have a right to your life and a right to your liberty, you should have a right to your property, which means economic liberty. It's your money, you should get to spend it, not the government.
Yeah!
The concept of the income tax is that the government owns all our income. We get to spend a certain amount under the conditions that the government lays down to us. And also, they use it endlessly to do things that are very harmful to us. Now, they can tax so much, there would be a rebellion going on if we had to pay every month for exactly what the government's spending. But they did something that that Thomas Jefferson objected to. He did not want the federal government to borrow money. It's too bad that didn't prevail. So that is one goal which we can improve upon in the Constitution. The federal government shouldn't have the right to borrow money.
Yeah! Yeah! Exactly! You're here! Amen!
And the Fed! 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 And the Fed!
You're stealing my lines. Of course, they should borrow money, but there's a limit to how much they can borrow, because if Congress and the President spend too much money and they keep borrowing, interest rates will go up, and high interest rates are detrimental, and you have to rein in the spending. But the appetite for big government from the people, unfortunately, as well as the politicians and the special interests, they all got together and they attacked the middle class by saying, no, we even want to spend more than the market will allow by borrowing. So that is the reason, at the same time they gave us the income tax, they gave us the Federal Reserve. So when we get our liberties back, and when we return to becoming a republic once once again, we will not have a Federal Reserve System and we will not have an income tax. We will have our personal liberties and our economic liberties being one thing, and they will be returned to the people. The people will become more creative and more productive, and lo and behold, there will be two consequences. There will be peace in the land, and there will once again be prosperity. But when we allow our government to take over the functions of trying to improve personal behavior and economic behavior, it cannot be done without an attack on personal liberty. So the bigger the government, the bigger attack on personal liberty. And the more tyrannical a government you have, the bigger the government is, the more spending there is, and the more likely there will be a debasement of the currency. Yes, we're suffering today from the consequences of 100 years of debasement of a currency. And it is nothing new. Matter of fact, the founders understood it rather clearly. It's been known in Bible times and ancient history. Governments tend to always, the more tyrannical, the more they control the money, the more they don't want the market to dictate the value of the money, the more they want to control the money and debase the currency because it enhances the power of the king or the dictators in charge. So this is the reason we got the income tax and the Federal Reserve at the same time, and we've had steady growth of government since then. Not only that, even though from 1913 up until 1971, we had some restraints on the government printing press. But in 1971, it was removed. And since 1971, the problems of the federal government has been endless. And now, what do we have? We have a poorer country. We have a smaller middle class. We have a shrinking wealth. The good jobs are overseas. But the special interests are still living high on the hog. They're still living high on the hog. They got into trouble with that system of debasement of currency. There's a transfer of wealth from the middle class to the very wealthy. And then when the collapse comes, which was predictable, the collapse of the financial bubble in 07 and 08, guess what? Because they lined up, got in control, had control of the Federal Reserve as well as the Congress and the special interests and the lobbyists, guess who got bailed out? Wall Street got bailed out.
Boo!
The Goldman Sachs of the world, the military-industrial complex, they all did quite well. But who suffered the consequences? What happened to the debt that should have been liquidated, the bankruptcies that should have occurred if we would have had the strict rules of the free market? No, because the special interests were in charge. They took that debt, they bought this debt, they bailed out the guys making all this money, and the debt was delivered to the people. So we own the debt now. We own the burden, the middle class losing the jobs, and all these wonderful plans, all these good intentions, even by many, well intended to make sure everybody had a house because we were so wealthy. We can provide free houses for everybody. Guess what? They lost their jobs and they lost their houses. It's a failed program, and this is what's happening today. It's happened for the last 4 or 5 years specifically, because it is realized now that of the fallacies of this paper money system of Keynesian economics, of big governments, welfareism. It doesn't work. Freedom works, but government does not work. So the realization that this happened about 4 years and 5 years ago, that something has to change, this is what has really revitalized the interest of liberty in this country. At the same time, we as a nation became very much aware of what has been going on in our foreign policy. And the awareness have told us nothing good is happening with our foreign policy. Our foreign policy needs to be changed. It should be designed to provide a strong national defense and national security. It should not allow us to be engaged in undeclared, unconstitutional, unwinnable special interest wars around the world.
Here, here. Woo!
Now, these things aren't an accident. Matter of fact, they're consequence of bad ideas. Ideas do have consequences. But there's been an idea taught in our schools for many, many decades, and it came out of the Depression. A lot of people, probably some in this room, have been taught that the Depression finally ended with World War II. It didn't happen that way. It's a disastrous thought. Even if that could be the case, you don't create a world war in order to boost up your economy. But it's totally foolish. But the Depression didn't end until afterwards. The Depression is caused by the financial system run by the Federal Reserve. They create the bubbles, and the necessary collapse it always comes, and that's what we're involved in. But the whole system now is being recognized. It's a failure. It doesn't work. The founders knew it. They tried to prevent it. They said only gold and silver can be legal tender. You can't print money, and you don't have the authority to establish a central bank that can create money out of thin air. Now, because we've had two groups defending certain portions of the freedom movement, what they have done is there's a lot of complaint. How are you going to go to Washington and have more compromise? That's the only way we can solve our problem. I say we've had way too much compromise from the people who want to spend the money.
Yeah! Whoa.
There's one group that wants welfare for the rich, the other wants welfare for the poor. The poor end up getting poorer, but they come together and they agree to spend money. And they have not agreed to cut anything. Right now, it is my proposal, and the only one that's running for president, and the only one that's voted this way for the past 30 years as well. That is, we have to cut spending. Spending, when government spends the money, some people sometimes worry about, oh, you're going to cut this government spending. Isn't this going to hurt the economy? No, it won't hurt the economy. It'll help the economy. When the government takes $1 trillion from the people and they spend it, you've been hurt because it came from your pocketbook. When the government spend it, do they spend it productively? One of the worst insults is when they say, and we hear it from the administration all the time, well, we have to spend this money because we have to invest in this and invest in that. Governments don't know how to invest. All they know how to do is bail out their crony buddies. That's what they do. My proposal in the first year is to cut the spending, the actual spending, by $1 trillion. Instead of compromising and getting two groups together to agree on each other's spending, what we need to do is bring a coalition together and start cutting both sides. We don't need this worldwide empire because it's a drain on our economy. If you spend trillions of dollars overseas, that's trillions of dollars out of our economy. So what we need to cut, I propose that we cut 5 departments as a starter. And, but it is crucial that we cut spending. You can't solve the problem of overspending and more debt and more borrowing and more printing press money by spending even more and printing even more and regulating even more. They're trying to solve the problems with the tools that they created the problems. What we need is obviously more freedom, more liberty, a better understanding of economic property, understanding about property rights. You own your life, but you should own the fruits of your labor. You should own your property.
Yeah! Woo!
Owning your own life and owning your own property does not give you license to hurt anybody else or anybody else's property. Private property ownership is a good way to protect the environment. It does not destroy the environment. But today, do you own your life? No. You have to ask the government what you can put in your body endlessly. You can be arrested for drinking raw milk and who knows what else. So, but today, what if you want to use your property? Can you use your property and then would there be any prior restraint? Oh, sure, there's prior restraint. You don't have the right to hurt anybody, but you don't have to have this obligation that you have to get 14 permits to decide how you can use your own land. It's your land. We need to change all the monetary policy, the policies toward protecting civil liberties rather than undermining our civil liberties, and obviously we have to correct our foreign policy. But in the last 10, 11 years, and the wars that have been going on, the wars that essentially have nothing to do with Al-Qaeda attacking us. Al-Qaeda was used as an excuse to do things to us and to our people and attack our liberties that they wanted to do anyways. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Example of this was the passage of this horrible, horrible Patriot Act. Some told me in Congress, how could they vote against the Patriot Act? It sounds so wonderful. Yeah, but what if it had been called Repeal the Fourth Amendment Act? How many people would have? Maybe if we wouldn't have the Patriot Act, guess what? We wouldn't have the policing activity and the violation of our personal lives and property at our airports. We wouldn't be putting up with the TSA. Safer. Oh, sure, we're a lot safer by being x-rayed from head to toe and having elderly people in wheelchairs undressed and little children molested. And at the same time, this is not the solution. I mean, what is the solution is what the founders gave us, is that they can't touch us, they can't touch our property, and they can't invade our houses without a proper warrant to do so. Also, I supported the authority to go after those responsible for 9/11. Although I had a different understanding why 9/11 occurred, but once you're attacked, you got to do something about it.
Yeah.
But it was used as an excuse for 10, 11 years now for occupation of countries that had nothing to do with 9/11. So, what we need to do, though, the occupations that they used as an excuse, we need to quit it because it doesn't help it. It's bankrupt us. In these last 10 years, our foreign policy in these wars have added $4 trillion worth of our debt. And you can literally say, would we be better off if the people had had that $4 trillion to spend and by themselves? This country would be much wealthier if we could do that. Of course, the real tragedy of war is that people die. People die at our hands, and they die. I mean, if we put our head in the sand and say that everybody that died at the hands of U.S. bombs were enemies of the people and the enemies of the United States and they were about to attack us, that's putting our head in the sand. Too many innocent people die, and too many innocent Americans die too. We've lost 8,500 Americans fighting these wars that should not have been fought. Somebody asked me the other day about, well, it's a good idea to bring them home, but when should you bring them home? I said, as president, as soon as I could get the ships there to bring them home.
Let them kill each other.
If we thought it actually improved our national defense, it would be a different story, but it doesn't. It creates more enemies, it bankrupts our country. If you read carefully those individuals who wrote about the plans for the Al-Qaeda, one of their strategies was to bog us down in wars in Muslim Arab countries and bankrupt this country. That was an explicit goal written in the 1990s. And you think, well, why are we doing this? Do we really help ourselves? People say, well, we have to do this to defend Israel. But is Israel better off today with all the nations around them, all the dictators that we propped up, say like Mubarak in Egypt? $40 billion we gave him, and he's taken them out immediately. Now the Al-Qaeda is involved in Libya, and they're involved in Egypt, and they're already, even our own government's admitting that the Al-Qaeda is now participating in the violence that we have helped encourage in Syria. But there are those in Washington, let me tell you, they are determined, they are just itching at the bit to use your money and your kids to take over Syria and put that under our authority. All with a strategic goal, and they can't wait to go into Iran, which makes no sense whatsoever. Even today, our Secretary of Defense, Panetta, has said they have no evidence whatsoever that the Iranians are on the verge of a nuclear weapon. And that is the truth. But this means that we still have to look at what is our obligation. The Constitution puts a lot of pressure on the President of the United States and the executive branch to provide national defense. But if we're wasting money in making us less safe, in bankrupting our country, what good is it all? And this whole idea of giving up on our national sovereignty, we are giving up on our national sovereignty because we don't go to Congress anymore. One thing I can guarantee you, as president, I would not go to a war without a declaration of war. If we have an enemy, fight them, win, and come home. I remember World War II, and I know that in less than 4 years, the Germans and the Japanese were defeated. I also remember the 60s because I was drafted. I was in the Air Force for 5 years. And I also know that there was a lot of frustration and problems that we faced because the economic consequences of the 1960s gave us stagflation and a severe economic crisis in the 1970s. But the whole thing is about the Vietnam War. Didn't solve our problems. We didn't declare the war. We didn't win the war. We lost and we left. And guess what? We're trading partners with them. We go back and forth. We invest over there and they invest over here. So a lot more can be achieved in peace rather than in wars that we don't need to be involved in. Non-intervention makes a lot of sense to me, and that is, all we have to do is think about how would we want to be treated by another nation, or another nation that may someday be more powerful than us. We don't want to be treated that way. We wouldn't want people to be dropping drone missiles on us and killing people and saying that we have a right to kill anybody, any place in the world. So how should we react? What's so terrible about making that consideration? Especially if we're safer and freer and richer if we don't endorse such foolish policies as that. Now, one of the other problems that occur when once war is declared is too often the consequences of the war falls on the American people. And this has been known as far back as the Civil War and World War I. Civil liberties tend to be undermined under wartime conditions. But occasionally we'd have an attack on our civil liberties and then they would back off after the war was over. But right now, the war is declared, it's a global war and it's endless, it's forever, and it's any spot in the world. And the attack on civil liberties, unfortunately, are likely to stay with us. Unless we tell Washington, unless we send people to Washington and say, the purpose of government is to protect our liberties, not to undermine and destroy our civil liberties. If truly a republic is returned to our country, we would not have the Patriot Act. We would repeal the Patriot Act. And certainly, a constitutional president would not need the congressional authority because the Congress never gave the authority to the president. The authority that he now declares that he's already used is that the president can assassinate American citizens without charges. But they claim they're bad people. There are a lot of bad people, but the courts are to sort that out. All the bad people have to be tried properly so that we never get improperly tried when we want to prove our innocence in court. That's why we have If the Nazi war criminals, after the Holocaust, at the end of the war, can be tried, there's no reason in the world why all Americans cannot have that same protection. Also, a person like Timothy McVeigh, he got tried, he had a trial, and also, all the people that we see as bad people, Adolf Eichmann was arrested many years after World War II, and he was taken to Israel, and he was tried and then executed. So it is that rule of law that is so important. But unfortunately, the president is assuming these powers, but the Congress is facilitating him. But just think of what happened. What kind of a Happy New Year present did we get this year? We got the President of the National Defense Authorization Act, which has reversed an awful lot of history in the move toward individual liberty, all the way back to the Magna Carta. This whole idea now, the president has the authority to arrest any American citizen by the military, held without trial, without charges, indefinitely in secret prisons. That is not part of America. The reason why this is important is under economic turmoil, there can be breakdown of the political system. And I don't like to see those kind of laws on the books. It is especially under these conditions that you want to protect extremely all American citizens so they are not charged and arrested for false reasons. But the way the law is written, it just said associated forces that can be arrested. That means you can be, maybe associated on the internet, maybe emails, maybe attending a meeting, maybe joining